We're a little mic challenged, so we got to make sure we get all this on tape. Again, like I said, my name's Tom Mattis. I'm the city manager here in Elgin, and we welcome everybody that's here tonight to talk about, to review our 2021 certificates of obligation debt issuance that the council is currently contemplating. First, I just want to introduce our staff real quick. This is Amy Miller, our Director of Community Development. Bo Perry is the city engineer. Chris Noble there in the back is our acting police chief. Gina Curtis is our police commander. Charles Cunningham here on my right is the assistant city manager and chief financial officer. Michael Gonzalez is our television producer plus director of public works. So he'll be manning that. And in the back, Pam Sanders is our director of human resources. And then the council members we have joining us tonight is Forrest Dennis, Thomas Ibis here at the dais. Mayor Ramirez is in the back, and so is Jessica Vega. So we welcome everybody here tonight. We're here tonight to review the basic facts and answer any questions y'all may have about the CO issue and what our plans are moving forward. We've got a few little ground rules we're going to run over as far as participation in the meeting tonight, and then I'm going to make a brief presentation, try to catch y'all up on what we've talked to the city council about to this point. But then we'll open the floor for any comments or questions that people want to pose. Now, this is different from a city council meeting. This is not a meeting of the city council. So we're not restricted, frankly, by the same rules that by law that the city council has to follow, meaning we hope it'll allow for more of a more typical Q&A dialogue back and forth. If you've ever come to a city council meeting to speak, you know you get one chance to speak. And but this format is more about a discussion. So we'll let the conversation just go where it goes, and it's all right to ask follow-up questions or ask more questions, more than one if you want to. Unlike council meetings, you don't have to sign up to speak. You can just raise your hand and we'll recognize you. But we don't have a microphone to pass around. So when we've done this before, the problem of making comments or questions from the audience doesn't get picked up on our YouTube broadcast. So I'm still going to need everybody to come to the podium. And when you do that, you need to give us your name and your address where you live, and then we'll take off from there. There's not necessarily a time limit on your comments or questions like we have at council meetings, but I said here we want to be respectful of others' time, but that doesn't look like that's going to be a big challenge tonight. So we want to have as many questions or comments that you have on your mind. But I would say that we want to ask everybody to embrace the same principles we ask when people are speaking at council meetings. No personal attacks or insults or anything like that. We're not here to discuss policy issues. That's what the city council's job is. We're here tonight to just share the facts of what we presented, the specifics about the projects that we're proposing that we move forward on, and the need for that. We can talk about those things as well. We're also not here to talk about other projects that aren't in this program, projects that we obviously have a long list of other projects we need to do, but our focus tonight is on what the council has pending right now before them to make a decision about. So, any questions about any of that? We want it to be pretty casual. So first here, I'm going to try to run through very briefly. It's a compilation of presentations that we've made to the council over the last 4 council meetings. We've had a lot of detailed conversation with the council, responded with more details about specific projects. We have a lot more information we can share based on whatever your questions are about these individual projects. But for first, I'm going to try to run through this quickly, but but everything that's in the initial part of the presentation, we can circle back to it any time you'd like to talk about any parts of that. So initially, this issue started out as a $24 million project list. That's how many projects we had in the list. The council initially approved a not to exceed number in their initial vote to advertise for purposes of moving forward with the discussion. A not to exceed amount of $25.8 million. That allowed for the inclusion of issuance costs, cost overruns, different things like that. But as you'll see, that number has come down, or at least the number we're talking about now is less than that. It breaks down to be basically $9 million in the general government area, which will be supported by property taxes. That's how the debt will be paid for over time, but we believe the amount that we've presented, the impact on the general fund tax rate, will not require an increase in the debt portion of the tax rate. I think we all know in Texas we have a pretty complicated, convoluted property tax system, but there's a debt portion of the rate that a part of your property tax rate of the city goes to retired debt issuance, and due to the growth of our assessed value, we think we can absorb this increase in annual debt service in a way that won't necessitate an increase in that debt rate portion. But on the water and sewer fund, we've got about $15 million worth of projects initially planned in this number. That at its worst, we think this is a high number. But if we did all the projects and set the amount at the originally proposed amount, the overall rate increase could be as high as $8 a month on everyone's utility bill. But I don't think in the end it's going to be near that high. So I'll get back to this. The sheet I showed you has a little more up-to-date information, but I just wanted you to see what council was shown in the very beginning. This is how we started out the conversation and how we listed the projects. One thing as you look at these projects here, I think that's important to point out on the far left side, the number that's on the far left-hand side here is the page number for where these projects are in our 5-year capital plan. So as you'll see as we go through this, that nearly all these projects have been in our 5-year capital plan for a number of years. It's a 5-year capital plan that we discuss and process publicly, and it's voted on publicly, and we have public hearings on. So these are, nearly all of these projects have been discussed and reviewed and planned for some time. These aren't new things that we just discovered recently that we need to do. They've been in the pipeline for quite some time. Frankly, we just haven't been able to afford them till now, and we couldn't afford them otherwise if we didn't do this debt issuance. Now, certificates of obligation is the funding vehicle we're using. That's a very common debt instrument used by cities throughout Texas to fund projects that you can't typically afford. And again, if you compare those numbers that I was just showing you that's included, and compare that to the fact that our entire operating budget for the city is under $19 million for all services, everything we do. The general fund is under $10 million. And the utility fund, which is a combined fund of water and wastewater, is at less than $6 million. So when you compare that to the cost of these projects, makes it fairly obvious why we can't afford to do these just out of annual operating funds, and why we have to issue debt. I think another thing that's very important to understand that this is an investment with these debt proceeds that we're combining with other available resources. Grant funds, private developer contributions of over $6 million to help support the projects we're doing. A significant amount of grant funds, almost a like amount, to where the investment, the proceeds that we'll get from this debt issuance will actually result in almost double that amount of improvements in the city. So we're combining multiple resources with this debt and not expecting it to fund everything. And I think it's important to understand at this point in time in Elgin's history, we're in a spot where we're clearly going to see significant growth in the future. Residential growth is then going to drive commercial growth, which hopefully will help us really increase our sales tax revenue and other tax revenue. So we have growth on the immediate horizon. That will result in much more robust revenue streams in the future for the city, where in 3 to 5 years, a lot of these type projects we will be able to afford out of our regular budget each year. We will be able to afford out of increased proceeds that way. But right now, like any growing small town, you face a point where the city has to do its part to kind of bridge that gap. Right now, we have the demand for services of a much larger city, but we simply don't have that revenue stream coming in. We need the houses to get built. We need the people to move here. We need the businesses to start up. And then that'll generate a different revenue stream for us in the future. So this really is about investing now in Elgin's future. So we're planning to do that we're better prepared in the future. I think another thing that is important to keep in mind is that, as you'll see in the information we're talking about, this debt issuance is probably going to cost the city almost $900,000 just to issue the debt, just to go through the process of issuing the debt and borrowing the money. So obviously, a city doesn't want to do that, particularly a small city. You don't want to do that every year, every other year. So when the staff thinks about these projects, when we put these projects together, when you consider the projects we've proposed, it's important to keep in mind that we're thinking about 3 years down the road. We're assuming that we're not going to borrow money again for 3 years. So this isn't about addressing needs that we have in the next 6 months. This is about what the city of Elgin is going to be in 2 or 3 years, and positioning ourselves from an infrastructure standpoint to be able to serve that larger city. The staff continues to maintain its recommendation, our original recommendation. We think all the projects that we've proposed and the funding we've proposed are the correct thing, and I'm very comfortable that in the future that, for the record to show clearly that we made this recommendation early in 21, that the city needed to move forward with these investments. At the same time, the council has worked very hard to walk through each one of these projects, to discuss all the projects, to look for opportunities to reduce costs wherever we could, and to literally line by line on the projects. We've gone through them, and we've gotten some general feedback from the council. And so we've made some adjustments to what we think reflects where the council is, generally based on individual input and feedback we've discussed at the meetings. But I would say that we're not, I want to make crystal clear, the council hasn't voted on anything yet, other than to start this process to advertise the not to exceed number. They'll be determining what the final list of projects and the funding for same will be on May 18th. But due to this discussion, the discussion the last 4 meetings, the last 3 months, we've kind of reorganized our list of projects into kind of 3 different categories that I personally believe this reflects generally where we are as an organization. The 3 different categories: the must-do now projects, ones that are still being discussed that kind of have majority of support of the council, and then ones that we're still kind of undetermined on. The must-do projects are essentially all infrastructure, as you might imagine. We have a number of important projects that are driven by the growth that's already occurred here. This isn't about serving growth in the future. This is as much about serving the growth that's already here today, the growth that's happening today, and responding to that. The must-do now are basically all what we had previously under utilities, water and wastewater projects, or most of them. The County Line Road widening project and the Elgin Police Department station renovations. But we're already to a point where what we consider are the must-do projects now represent over 70% of the entire issue. So it kind of gets down to, there's still just a few projects we're still working on. Now, the majority support what we're labeling of these projects. As you'll see, kind of the common trend here is these are parks improvements. They're not exactly in the same category of must-do. Don't necessarily have to do them now to respond to the growth, but I would just make the argument these are the things that separate your community from others. These are the things that people really respond to. Obviously, most of the folks are never going to go down to the sewer plant and see the investment we made there. They're not going to really feel that same difference. But infrastructure development that we're going to see occur here will happen in a very comparable way to many other cities, certainly cities around Austin, if you've lived around here for the last 20 years. But what makes your town different, where you get your character of your town, makes your town unique. I think what makes Elgin unique is we have some really great parks and we have a really great downtown. And so we're trying to enhance that with these projects, and I'll circle back to these as well here in a minute. And then we discussed this at the last meeting. This list has changed a little bit, but we came down to the last council meeting. We had these 3 different projects that we were still, the group was still kind of undetermined on, but we made some changes there. So to kind of recap this, and this is the spread, the one paper I handed out to you this evening. This kind of, it shows a little bit of just a reorganization of the same projects to where we are today. Obviously, all the way on the left is where we started with the initial $24 million I talked about with the issuance cost added to it. But as you go from left to right on this page, you'll see that we've made some changes. That's the initial, the column that says initial, that's just basically a reorganization of that information. And then the adjustments, I want to walk through pretty quickly here. These are the changes that we've made so far to that issue. The first one there is the building renovation at 202 Depot Street. This is the Poth building. It's known by, it's a rehab project that we had planned. For business reasons, we've decided that we would pull that out of this issue, and we're still committed to rehabbing that building. It'll be part of the discussion with the new police station, but we've decided not to fund that through this vehicle, and we're still committed to doing that project, but we'll just come up with that $100,000 someplace else. Keep going down that list. At the bottom there, the Carver Street lift station is a project that when we put the original proposal together, we had anticipated and thought we were going to get a fairly sizable grant for that project. And in the interim, since we've been working on it, we found out we aren't getting that grant, but that doesn't change the fact that we need to continue with that project. So we had to add $350,000 back into the program to fund that project completely. Under the majority support, one thing that the City Council did make a decision about to this point was that we had initially had $500,000 in the presentation or in the program to reconstruct all the downtown alleys in the Central Business District. If you've been down those alleys, you know we have drainage problems, utility challenges, a lot of different issues. But after some discussion and in particular feedback from downtown business owners and our Main Street Board and different organizations, the feedback came from them almost unanimously that they'd rather delay that project now and put that off to some point in the future, but use that same $500,000 to provide more robust funding for the phase 1 of the Central Park or Veterans Park expansion downtown. So Council has already agreed to make that change, and we basically shifted that $500,000 up to make that. So the proposed funding right now is $600,000 to support phase 1 of Veterans Park, and we won't be doing the downtown alleys, as I said earlier, now for at least 3 years. And then under the to be determined projects, we did have some discussion at our last meeting. The Winterizing the water treatment plant is another project that came very late to the game. We had already started this when we had the winter storm event that we had, where we had a lot of historic things happen, and one of those things that was obviously illustrated through that process was that all the city's water and wastewater systems are not entirely backed up by alternate power sources. And so the council wanted to talk about and consider what could we do about that. So kind of at the last minute in the development of the project, we just plugged in a number of $2.5 million in that category to move the project forward. Since that time, we've done some pretty detailed analysis and presented that issue to council. Basically, what that analysis told us was that for us to provide a independent backup power supply for every part of the water and wastewater system would cost about $3.2 million. And I think the council, the general consensus seems to be that that's too much to invest at this time. But at the same time, we didn't want to completely walk away from that issue. We wanted to try to make some progress. So what we've ended up doing is reducing that amount to $1.5 million. And what that $1.5 million is currently earmarked for about $500,000, we can buy a large portable generator that would sit on a trailer that we could haul around to any site that we needed to that could power about anything. And enough funding to modify all of our systems so we'd have quick connections if we ever needed to do that. Then we also set aside $1 million to consider possibly a generator run the waste or the water treatment plant. We already have a backup generator at the wastewater treatment plant, but it would obviously take a very large generator to run our water plant. So we've set aside $1 million to consider that. We're also considering, we're in the process of waiting for Encore to provide us a cost estimate of what it would cost to build an alternative power supply to the plant. So we would be fed from two different sources that would function, I think, as well as a generator. But we're still in the process of trying to decide which one of those will be more cost effective and more effective. So at this point in time, we've reduced that amount by $1 million. And so under the Winterizing the water treatment plant system, that's why it's now at $1.5 million. And then the final change was upsizing of wastewater and water lines, basically out along County Line Road. It's typical that when development starts to occur, all developers are required to build water and wastewater lines and systems that serve their development, but only serve their development. So sometimes it makes sense for the city to partner with those developers to, when they're installing their main lines, to upsize those lines so that we can accommodate future growth down the road and try to avoid having multiple sewer lines, multiple sewer systems, multiple water lines in the same roadway. And so that was an amount that we had higher than we bid the projects out. They've come in a little less, but the council wanted to stick to just the amount that we're committed to, so we were able to reduce that amount by $425,000. So we have better numbers on issuance cost, and now that we're closer to what we think the number would be, so that's what resulted. So the end result is right now we're it seems to be possibly general support for reducing the original amount by almost 10%, $2 million, and so the revised number where we're at is about $23.7 million at this point. And again, I want to make clear that that's basically my viewpoint of gauging the consensus conversation that council's had at council meetings and what I've interacted with them individually. So basically that's really the totality of my brief presentation. It wasn't quite 20 minutes, Mayor, but I got it done pretty quick, quicker than normal, right, than what I usually do. So with that, we're ready to talk about any question you have, any comment. If there's any part of this that I've already talked about that you want me to circle back to, we can go a lot deeper on the individual projects themselves if there are any questions about that. So the floor is open. Sue, come on. You're going to start? All right. Well, go ahead, Mayor.
I'm Ron Ramirez. I'm the mayor here in 701 East 8th Street.
Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud. One thing that the city manager said and that I want to emphasize is that these projects are not just made-up projects. These projects have been in our 5-year plan, sometimes for years. There comes a point in time, and I personally feel that Elgin is at that point in time where we have to do something. We can't, as a council, we can't, as a staff, just say, well, we'll deal with it in a couple of years. We'll deal with it later. At at some point in time, Elgin is gonna cross that bridge from a nice little town to a nice medium-sized town. And that's coming, it's gonna happen, we know it's gonna happen, we're trying to plan for what's gonna happen. So the projects that we're looking at, even though we have them divided, or the staff has them divided into must-do and preferred, et cetera, et cetera. If you look at those projects, they're important. And the council has spent, I would say, 3.5 months doing a lot of homework on these projects. It's not something that we haven't done our diligence on. We've done a lot of homework on, do we want to spend the money? Do we need to spend the money? There's always the option of going, yeah, we'll do it in 3, 4, 5 years when we're better off. Yes, our no doubt, as the city manager mentioned, there's no doubt that 5 years from now, our revenue, especially sales tax revenue, is going to be able to give us some leeway and some freedom to pay for stuff without having to do this. But that's not going to help us right now. We need to prepare ourselves for 3 years down the road. We're looking at preparing Elgin for 3 years down the road. So besides the infrastructure, which is so important, the water and the wastewater and the wells we have to dig, et cetera, and the county line road that we have to double in size. It says county line road, but it's not a county road. It's a city road. So, the developers and the city are responsible. And pretty soon, the way it's going, it'll be a 30-minute trip if we don't do something with county line road. And that's something that that we're looking at. But the parks are so important to me when you go into a community. If you have something to take your family to and enjoy the day and enjoy the afternoon, it makes all the difference in the world. And when people are coming and looking at Elgin and saying, well, they're going to check the schools out, they're going to check the restaurants out, they're going to check the parks out. So parks are just as important, even though they're not under the must-do, they're just as important for the families that live here already and the families that are coming. So I just wanted to make a few comments about these projects are well thought out projects. And we, in the council, are still, we've pretty much done our homework, but we won't make our decision, as was mentioned, until the 18th. But these projects are well thought out, and when we make our decisions, it's going to be based on what's good for Elgin. That's our decision. What's good for Elgin? What is Elgin going to need? What would be good for Elgin? So I just wanted to make that comment to anybody that might have a question for something like that. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Go ahead.
I'm Beth Rowlington, 135 Red Hump Road, but I'm also the Director of Advocacy Outreach, and we're at 200 Depot. So I have a question about that police new building, but I came out to say the parks, what Mayor Ramirez said 45 years ago. I was with my husband. We were driving through Austin on our way to some camping trip or do something, and we stopped at Pease Park in Austin, and we said, hey, this is where we want to live. In Central Texas, this park is so beautiful. So it's true. The parks can sell a town. We moved to Austin. Later, we got out of Austin and came to Elgin area, which is much nicer. But the parks during COVID, for me personally, were an emotional lifesaver. During the time we were so shut down and we couldn't see our friends or go anywhere, I could still walk in the park. And that made a huge difference in my ability to cope with the kind of stress that we were dealing with in our business work at Advocacy Outreach. Not only me personally, but the park system enabled Advocacy Outreach to retain its family literacy program, which was at risk. Once the schools closed down, we couldn't use the school classrooms that we had to work with our mothers and children, mothers learning English, children learning the skills that they were going to need to enter school. And the Zoom was a very poor substitute, but we were able, after a few months of COVID, to get out into the parks, and the parks became our classroom, and have been for several months now, our family literacy classrooms, because we could meet in a socially distanced way. We could teach the children about nature. The mothers could see each other and get emotional support and literacy support. So I want to say thank you for the parks. And we're really excited about the Central Park Avenue improvement. Of course, that's right outside our door. And we envision that we're going to just be kind of living outside in the future, park-wise, because it worked out so well for us in an educational setting. We love that. But I have one question about because I didn't know that this police department renovation. Do you have any plans to take over our building?
But we'd be willing to do that if you want to give that to us.
Can we stay there?
No,
Are you
no.
renovating beside us, or is it?
No, actually, we, those, is this the one, Amy? Okay. No, all of our plans to this point have made the assumption that you'll be still there right where you're at.
Okay.
This is,
So that little tan L and then that darker brown are the current police
Yeah, let me get
station?
back.
And then that little white strip
yeah,
on
right
the
here is
street?
you, right?
That's us, okay.
Yeah.
All right, good.
But I don't mind talking about this a little bit because I think this is important to understand. When we started this part of the program, you'll actually see in there we had Veterans Park, the expansion of Central Park. We have demolition of 202B, what's that called? That little building that's right beside the police station. And then the Poth building, which is down here on the corner. Those are kind of listed as independent projects, but as this issue's evolved, the more we've discussed it, you'll see that, you know, we really want people to look at it in this sense, that we're really, those projects together will completely create a whole new corridor in this section of Depot. Veterans Park, a whole new police station across the street. The Poth building may be incorporated in that. We think hopefully we have different options there where we can restore that building or possibly include it in the whole project. And then that'll also, all those will combine really well with the cart station we have down here. And then what's not listed in the program, because we got a grant for it, is an entirely new sidewalk system that will come through here and replace all the sidewalks and make that whole area a lot more walkable. So I think it's important that when you look at that list, we didn't really present them that way. They're not organized that way, but there's 3 or 4 projects on that list that all combine together to make a big impact on that. We're basically going to create a whole new block of our historic downtown area. So that's what's exciting about it.
Well, we were included a little bit in the planning phase with Elizabeth. She asked for input from our clients and our students, and also from me. And so I do want to say that the community we serve, which is the lower income community in Elgin, has often felt disenfranchised. And they feel very included in it. They love the location. They feel it's accessible. A lot of them live on the a little bit south of this, but still pretty far from Thomas Park. And they feel like this is a part of town where they feel respected and included. They've been very positive about.
Well, thank you. I can
location.
tell from the staff I can tell you from the staff standpoint that your building and all that we consider that just part of the whole thing, or we're not planning on.
Social services.
Yeah, and I would also tell you too that we're What I've shared with you tonight is almost the entirety of the planning that we've put in the specifics of what we're gonna build, so there'll be a whole different open process about what exactly gets built there, what the design will be, how it will work, so you as the neighboring property owner will have plenty of opportunity to be involved in that, at least know what the plans are as we move forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Let me mask back up.
Anyone else? Thanks, Sue. I knew we could count on you. Thank you.
Hi. Hello, I'm Sue Beckwith. I live over on 8th Street, East 8th. I won't give you my exact address. You know, I guess I want to just think about our values as we create a future of Elgin beyond 3 years, 30, 40 years. In 40 years, what's Elgin going to look like, and why did we move here in the first place? We moved here for community. And I think we have an opportunity now, if we look around our country and our city at a divided country, what are we doing in our built environment to increase community and to be welcoming to the 40,000 more people who will be moving here in the next 10 to 15 years? In 10 years, 40% of the vehicles on the road are going to be all electric. So where are the electric stations that we're building? Where is the electric infrastructure? 60% of our sales tax revenue is going to be from internet sales. So where are we investing in brick and mortar, and why? And what do we exactly expect the payback to be from that? So for me, you know, I just kind of want to point out why did we each move here? And what is, when I ask everyone of all political, the spectrum, what do you love about Elgin the most? It's the community, and it's the community we build together every day. So when we think about, yes, building a new block downtown in front of Veterans Park, really our gem in the heart of downtown, which I think is why the downtown businesses said, no, don't pave the alleys, enhance the parks. Enhance the parks, because that's where community gathers. Now, I would ask the council to consider, really, why would you put a police station right in the center of the heart of our town? If 50,000 people are going to live here, do we want them to come into town at night? Do we want them to see a dark building? Or do we want them to have active places where they can grow together and share that's across the street from a park? Yes, we're going to build a new block. And what does that block look like? And how does that block support community? So that's just my thinking as a citizen, as a taxpayer, and as someone who moved here for community. How is our built environment reflecting our values? And I've been told by some of you in this room, don't just criticize, offer solutions. So I'm just going to throw out a wild hair idea, because that's what we're doing. If we're going to invest, if we need a new city hall annex, and I understand that the city's growing and I understand the need for the utilities and so forth, why not on Depot Street build a new library, a public library of the future? Put the city hall annex in the library that we have now, and put the police station out on the other side of the highway, where we've already invested millions in infrastructure, meaning electric and so forth under the roads. A library downtown in the center of town, a library of the future that will have, could have, audio and video production facilities for high school students, could have tutoring facilities. Kids I talk with, I work with the schools, don't want to be tutored at the schools. It feels institutional, it feels kind of rigid, but want to be tutored. So why not have a library where the students could go to tutoring, the parents could then roam around downtown, eat at a restaurant, hang out at the park? So when we think about downtown, what are our values? What does it represent? And is a police station with a jail really what we want? in the heart of our downtown. So thank you.
Sue, are those rhetorical questions, or do you want me to try to answer them?
Well, it's just
I
really
can
just-
respond to the why are we building it there, why are we talking about it there, and the city hall, just to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah, and I
Okay.
assume you know this already, it's cost.
Yeah,
We,
It's city-owned property already.
what we talked about is, sure, look, in both cases, ideally, the best long-term for the city is probably to go out off 290 and buy 5 or 10 acres and build a complex that would be City Hall, a municipal complex. But we went down that road, even down over here, over at the oil mill, and, we're talking about triple the money we have here. The consensus was the police station, we own that property now.
Right.
We wouldn't have that investment. It would be an add-on. We'd remodel the existing building and add on there. Now, what I will tell you that I think you want to hear that Amy's already hammered me about is that it's not going to be a chrome and glass. It'll have to be a building that on the exterior, on the storefront, is going to have that storefront feel to fit in with our historic downtown.
Yeah, I think
So
it
it'll
just
take-
won't be a place people gather.
All right, but it'll take a unique design. Same way with the City Hall project is, I'm not disagreeing with anything you said.
Yeah.
But the City Hall project is as much about the gas station property next door just happens to be available right now. And we could build an addition for office space there if we could acquire that. And then with the library, the historic building, the City Hall, we'd have a campus-type feel downtown. Part of that is about trying to stay downtown with the City Hall.
Why?
Well, I know when I came here, I know the story about, there was discussion about building the City Hall right next to the rec building, and I was told repeatedly, got big noise about removing the City Hall from downtown. And we have this unique building, so.
Yeah.
So your points are correct long-term, but I just want you to know, we haven't pitched or discussed this project for an expanded police station or this City Hall as the long-term solution.
Yeah.
It's
And
gonna
I
take
understand
something
the
bigger
cost in
down
it.
the
It's
line.
already city-owned property.
So it really was that. Now, I think you and I think alike about, can't always think about cost. You have to think about the long-term investment,
Absolutely.
what you're saying. But I just want you to know that those weren't issues that we didn't discuss.
Right.
But again, in this step, council is trying to walk the line between responding to our needs, but doing our best to keep the cost to a minimum.
Yeah, and I understand it's already city-owned property, and I just think it's for all intents and purposes, it's a permanent decision. And I think it's the wrong one. I think it's short-term cost savings over, what does it say about us? What does it say about our town? That across from our beautiful, beautiful park, which hopefully eventually have a bandstand and where people gather, and where people come at night, that they want to see maybe something lit up, someplace they can go to that's right there, that then flows into the rest of downtown. I hear you about people want City Hall to be downtown because that's charming, and perhaps a piece of City Hall could be downtown, but the world is changing. Hardly anyone comes to City Hall, even before COVID. 75% of people are gone in Austin at work every day. People are dealing with their government online even more now. That's the reality. It's the reality of what the data show and what the,
Yeah.
So, I mean, if
as
you
I
can
said,
come up
I'm-
with anything creative
Well,
to
I
figure out
think we
where to
will.
put the police station, I just think that is just a very bad, kind of the worst, one of the worst possible locations.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Sure. Appreciate the comments. Thank you. Anyone else? I can keep talking, as everybody else knows here, but I don't know. I'll be glad to talk about, is there anything else in particular you want to know more details on, or?
Sosnowski. I'm off Old McDade Road. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk about the bond, issuance of the bond, and whether we have the money to spend and whatnot. And I think I appreciate y'all having this forum tonight to explain kind of the thought process that's gone through with putting together the project list, and also the need to do it, because like you know, like the mayor said, we're right on that precipice that Elgin's about to boom. And you can put your head in the sand and think it's not going to happen. It's happening, and we've got to be able to invest and plan for it. Obviously, I've got a little one now to think about, and you know, I sure as heck want a city where we can have community, where we can have parks, where we have, you know, where I don't have to, you know, go through losing water during Snowmageddon, you know, with a child through that. I was already pregnant and hoping not to birth during that time. So anyways, all the infrastructure projects are needed, and I just want to thank everybody in council for thinking through the projects, and you know, just say that I'm in support. We've got to plant this tree at some point. You can't always have a big oak tree when you want it. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, there's got to be something else.
I think that we're going to, because we advertise this from 6 to 7:30, that we should be here till 7:30.
Okay.
Yeah, if anybody has anything they want to talk about, great. And if not, you want to discuss something personally with myself, or I mean, if we're sitting here, right? Is that right, Tom? Or does it have to be in public?
No, it's fine. Don't talk in groups. Talk to the individual council members. Yeah, that's a good idea. If you just want to come up and ask one-on-one questions, we can go ahead. I'd be glad to take it.
Hey, David Sanchez, live off Romer.
Thank you.
Couple questions for you.
Okay.
I noticed you talked about a bunch of these, but I don't recall you talking about the city annex when you were kind of giving your overview, so I'd appreciate it if you take a few minutes to do that. And the second thing for you was, we all lived through February, right? We all know the consequences of that. But it seems like you defunded the water treatment upgrades by almost half. And so I'm curious if you could describe, will we still have water? Will the town be able to provide the water? Because you know how the water system works.
Sure.
If one part goes out, it either means lower levels for everybody else or none. So I'm just curious, can we still provide water to everybody at the reduced cost?
Yeah, so let me, you want to do that one first, or?
Go
Okay.
for it, whichever,
All right.
whatever makes sense to you.
Well, all right, let's just stick with that then. So basically, the water situation is like this. If you, on our website, the staff prepared a pretty detailed day-by-day report about what happened, what we faced, how we dealt with that. I think as we all know, and certainly as time went by, everybody was nervous about what was happening in Elgin, but we realized it was happening to everybody. And I feel really comfortable in saying that, comparatively speaking, I think the city's response was as good as anybody's, and we got everything together. In our case, why the focus is on power is, in our case, the only reason we didn't have water is the power went out at our plant. That a line went down. This illuminated the fact that we had one main power line serving the whole plant. I don't know if you know where the plant is out in the country, and when that line came down, all power to our plant was out. We had the ability to produce water through the whole thing. Our wells functioned, everything worked right, but as soon as we lost power, we couldn't do anything about it. We were without power, I forget it now, 36 straight hours. And the water system, I'm sure you know, it's all about, you create water, you fill your tanks, you fill your towers, and then people draw off that water. So the fact that we lose power, and we do all the time, the plant will lose power, we'll turn it off for a few hours. repair something, but if you have enough storage, then people have water at their home. What happened was 36 straight hours without water, it drained that entire system. And so we couldn't provide water to anyone in town. And the second Encore came out and repaired that line, our plant fired up, we began producing water, and as soon as we could fill the whole system, people had it back in their home. So it was never an issue about our water plant. Our ability to produce water. It was all about power. That was the only issue that happened. So that's why this decision is focused on, well, how do we reproduce power? And so what we went through was, and I've got it here, we could walk through every one of them if you want, but you know, part of the issue in understanding that is we have multiple steps along the way. The plant isn't the only thing that has to run for everybody to have water. So once we went through, well, what do we have to do to put a generator on every piece of equipment, every lift station, every pump station, and the sewer plant, and the water plant. I keep saying sewer plant. The sewer plant project has a backup power in it. What do we have to do so that if this same thing happened, we could drive around, fire up every one of those generators, and we'd have all the water we need? So that's what we presented. That's what the 3.2 million would require. Now, the problem with that is, I'm sure you can guess, forget the count. How many different generators is that, Bo?
It's like 18 total between sewer and water.
15 or 18 different generators. Well, then we'd have stopped short of saying I'm guaranteeing we never had a run of water, because that's predicated on every one of those generators working at that moment when we need them all to work. So after we walked through that with the council, it wasn't about, you know, again, I think it was the number. In the end, it wasn't about should we do it, is that a good thing? It was about what can we afford. And so I think that, I'm not going to speak for the council, but I think the general consensus was, we're not turning our back on never doing that whole thing. It's just that we think maybe the starting point is to buy this one. Like I said, the plan alone will require $1 million generator. So I think this step is about, well, let's at least get that one in place, or get something in place out there, and then over time we can knock out all these others. So I didn't mean to suggest that we're still not committed to doing all that. It's just, again, an affordability thing of trying to get the number down to where it works. But the good news is we have that analysis now. We know the city engineer and his team did it, and it's very specific. We know exactly what we have to do. I would say the other thing that we've learned from that is that all private developments that have their own lift station, or the city didn't require this before, but we require the private developer to pay for that backup generator now. So everything getting built from here on now will have its own backup power, and it'll be paid for by the private developer and not the city. So did that answer your question about that? Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, lift station is, well, this is, I think if you know, water lines are pressurized by the tower, and so the water pressure pushes water everywhere you want it to go. Sewer typically is gravity flow, so you have to, on top of the hill, gravity flows to the plant. And lift stations are a way engineers came up with that you can get, doesn't matter where you're at, you can get sewer to your house. So we talk about all the time, you can always have city sewer. It depends how much you want to pay for it. And these lift stations enable that sewer to get to our plant. Elm Creek is one of the projects we have in here. As you might imagine, has one massive lift station out there that serves that entire development. Gravity flows into a wet well out there on County Line Road, a big well, and it's pumped from there to the station, to the wastewater treatment plant, because it couldn't gravity flow all that distance. So these lift stations are utilized to provide sewer in areas we wouldn't otherwise pump, but it's crucial to the system, in that if the lift stations don't work, then that's when the sewage starts running out on the ground. And so I know that wasn't really scientific, Bo, but did I get
Pretty
it right?
close.
Okay, all right, thanks. So the City Hall Annex project that we talked about, this is, I mentioned it earlier, this is a situation where we had kind of two different issues come together. One is that we, again, like everything else, we're clearly growing. We've fanned out our offices and all available space that we have. We've basically taken over the Fleming Center now with office space, and where we used to be able to make that available to everybody. We've, once we moved the council chamber here, we've taken over the chamber over there with more office space. We literally have positions that are approved in the budget that we can't fill yet because we don't have office space for them. So we have a need to expand a new office space. If you've been in our City Hall building over here, it's a great building. It's a cool historic building, but frankly, it's just not really functional for office space, and certainly not completely ADA accessible and all of that. So clearly, we need something in the future. But as I mentioned earlier, the property right next door on the other side, that what do we call that one? The Hearst Garage. We've had some preliminary conversations with the current owner. It's up for sale. We see it as more of a unique opportunity to, because it's be next door, it's similar to the police station. If we could acquire that property, we could kind of maximize an office building on there that we would use. We'd have a shared parking lot. It would seem to work. Again, it wouldn't satisfy our 20-year down the road growth, but at least it's kind of an immediate step for us. So again, that's another thing that I would say it's more about timing and opportunity is why we plugged it into this. But to be honest about it, we don't have a whole lot more specific plans for it other than that. If this is included, we include the funding, then we'll begin the design and conversation about that. But it really is an opportunity for us to spend a little, get more office space that we need for the immediate future, but not spend all the money it would take to go off to a greenfield site and build a whole new building.
Okay.
Did I get to your question somewhere and
Yeah,
all that?
I think you
Okay,
did.
all right, all right.
Thank
good.
you. And by the way,
Thanks.
my wife and I represent your coming wave. We moved here from Round Rock about 8 months ago, so.
Well, good, that's great. Welcome. Do you live in one of the new neighborhoods? No, we live off of Round Rock. Oh, great, great. We're looking at some additional properties here now. Outstanding, well, good, welcome. Thanks for coming out. Anyone else? Comments, questions?
More kind of a popcorn. Talking
Yes,
about the offices, what about remote work? Because I'm thinking as you're expanding offices, could there be something to where you design the new city offices to be more flex space so they could be used for the community, or just, I'm assuming too, more and more people are going to want to have the flexibility to maybe work some from home, some in the office. So is that a way to just create something a little more flexible? So that's just a comment.
Yeah, no, I actually think it's a good idea. I would say, I think Sue mentioned before that I've told everybody, the truth is when COVID started, I thought, oh man, this is going to last about a month and we're going to get huge pushback from the community about City Hall being closed. And we've just gotten none of that. And obviously we've continued to conduct business. We're building, we issued, what did I hear the other day, 80 building permits in the last 4 weeks. That's what kind of construction we have going on. We've done all that remotely. We can do that all over the internet. People, of course, are wearing out our drive-through window now, but the complaints that we've got about I can't come in City Hall have, extremely minimal. And I think from a staff standpoint, they would tell you that, I'm the least well-versed in the Zoom meetings and all that, the remote stuff, but we've done really well that way. And everybody we deal with has evolved to that situation. So I think it's a good point to say, you hear this all the time. I think what we learned over the last couple of years that way may open whole new avenues for us. We may be able to do business in a different way. Even our council meetings, we struggled at first, but we got those down pretty well where we can do those remotely as well. So that's a good point. It should be part of our thinking. Anybody else? Any other? All right. Well, I think what the mayor said is right. If you want to just ask questions or talk to anybody, that's why we're all here. And we appreciate everybody coming out tonight. got some really good feedback. I appreciate that, and I'm glad the council was here to hear all that stuff, so. Anybody else? All right, well, we'll be hanging around here. There's, we got canned water from Snowmageddon or whatever it was said back here, that you're welcome to have it if anybody's thirsty. So thanks again to everyone for coming out. Oh, I'm sorry, before, Jessica, anybody else, council, anybody want to say anything else for us?
I think I would. I've been debating whether to or not, but I think that one of the concerns in the community that I've heard a number of times is that once we get this $25 million, we're going to spend it however we want. And I think it's certificate of obligation, right? And when we put it in that category, we're obligated to spend it on that. We can't take it from this bucket and put it in this bucket over here. Is that correct?
Yeah, the actual legal document that the council will approve won't be quite as specific as this list. And the reason for that is that the more specific you get, then the less opportunity you have to address overruns, to do different costs. As we've talked about with the 2 building projects alone, it would be short-sighted of us to be real specific about what that cost was going to be, because we don't know. At the same time, there's opportunity to save funds, save money, but it will be, the legal document is specific about categories, street projects, utilities. We can't spend it however we want. So it has to be capital projects. It'll have to be projects that are done here. As I showed earlier, we actually have some savings left over from prior issues that we're putting towards the cost of the sewer plant now, and we'll be able to do that. So it's specifically confined. At the same time, it won't have this same list I'm showing you, but that's why we're going through this exercise now. At the same time, I believe that the council is committed to that. Whatever list of projects they approve, whether it's specifically listed in the ordinance or not, they're committed to doing those projects. And I think that's what we'll be saying on the record. We're at least going to do these projects. Hopefully, when we get to the end, we'll have some money left over and we can do other projects, but they'll still be in those very tight categories of infrastructure.
Okay. And you covered what was going to be my follow-up.
Okay, sorry.
Money that we have left from.
Yeah, so
previous COs.
yes, the short answer is we can't spend it however we want. There's very specific categories. We can't spend it on salaries. It all has to be capital improvements. We have to demonstrate that to the public. And that's not just a political issue. The truth is that when we issue debt like this, it's tax exempt, and we run into legal and IRS TARP issues if we try to use it for something other than what the ordinance says.
Forrest, thank you for bringing that up, and Mr. Maddox, because so many people are misinformed, thinking that we can use this money, or we're going to use this money on just anything we want. And it's so important to know legally we can't. It's got to fit into this category. It's got to fit into this category if we happen to have money that we didn't spend quite as much as we thought we were going to spend. So it's not just money that, like Mr. Maddox said, it's not money to pay somebody's salary and give them a raise or something. That's not even legally possible.
Hey, Charles, come up to the mic if you're going to speak.
I just wanted to make the point that all of these projects will come back to the council when the contracts are done and on the design, so you'll get a chance every time, and we'll reference, okay, we sold these bonds for these projects, here's a project, here's the design contract, and so every one of these projects will come back to you so that you'll know that we're just ticking them off as we go along. So it's not a question of, oh, we'll bring something up that you never heard of. These projects will come back to you at the design phase, at the construction phase, and so forth.
Yeah, that's a really good point. All this money has to be there. It'll be separate in a fund. It can only be spent at the direction of council. And that can only be done in a vote at a public meeting. So it's not like a budget where the council approves this general amount and the staff has the authority to spend within that amount. When you borrow funds this way for capital projects, they have to be very specifically documented how every penny of it's spent. So, yeah, that's a good point. Sure.
I have complete confidence in your ability to be innovative with trying to find funding and trying to find places. Can you help me understand, so if the bonds go forward and a part of the list is a police station and documents say that it's going to be downtown across from our park, and the bonds are approved and then it comes time to spend them, but you've in the meantime come up with a brilliant creative solution to put the police station out by the highway where the cars can just jump on that highway and give speeding tickets in a moment's notice. Can we then build something different as long as it is a government building, or because it's restricted in that way? The property couldn't be sold, obviously. But
Yeah, see,
how would
now-
that work?
So you're trying to trick me and asking
No, I'm
me
not.
that.
I'm not that smart.
No.
And I'm
No,
certainly not that manipulative.
no,
to
but
try
your
and trick
point's
you.
well taken. At the end of the day, if but it's a good point. This is why, our recommendation is the ordinance will say that we're going to use these funds for a police station.
Okay, but it won't say where.
Well, again, in the end, what that exact language will be is a lot of council's discretion.
Okay.
And if the ordinance, it wouldn't be unheard of for the ordinance to say, we're using these funds to build a police station right here on Depot Street in this location. If we do that, then yes, we're confined to
Right.
that exact location. Now, what can happen is, ultimately, the council could say, we decided we're not gonna build the police station. But that would mean we're not building it at all with that issue. And then that money could be spent on water improvements. So you could still, that could shift over to other categories. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So if we set a specific location, we're confined to that location. But just because we say a specific location doesn't necessarily mean we have to build that there. Do you know what I'm saying?
The last part.
We
threw
don't,
me.
not there wasn't the right, I shouldn't use that word. We don't necessarily have to build the police station.
Right, but
But
if
if we build it, we
approve-
put it
I mean,
there.
I don't
But no,
disagree
it's a
that
good
the police
example
station
about
needs more
why
room.
instead, while we're talking specifically to be totally transparent about what we're thinking about,
Yeah.
at this level, when it comes to the legal document, that's exactly why, business-wise, it's better for the city to not be that specific about the exact location.
Right, because it
to-
reduces your flexibility.
Right.
So you could say, the document could say, we're going to build a police station.
It's. Right.
Expanding, which implies it's located on the same.
Well, but even that, what exactly does that mean? That doesn't mean,
Right. Well, I
So
guess it's up
again-
to you, council members, to just
Well,
work
but
that
again,
part out.
but it's not an arbitrary decision, that's the whole
Right.
point. These projects, again, will be fully vetted publicly and will be discussed, and we don't have any, just all the points you made before, Sue. I don't think anybody necessarily disagrees with all that, so.
Yeah.
But it is about getting the funding set aside in a placeholder, so we can at least talk about these things seriously. But yeah, at the end of the day, but then, again, I hate to use this word political, but sometimes it comes down to that. Sometimes you have to be very specific to get the issue passed. So that will be an issue that the council and at some point, our legal counsel will weigh in on how,
On the language in
how specific does, because the point is right, the ordinance itself, we are bound by what it says by law to do those. So you want to be, you can't just say, well, just trust us to do the right thing.
No,
You got to
not
be
with my
more
money.
specific
You
than that. But again, understanding the part about, say this is the school district will face this if they do a bond issue. That's why all their planning has to be up front, because they have to be very specific about this is the exact school we're going to build in this location. This is what it's going to look like. And that's what people vote on. That's why COs give cities the flexibility to make decisions on the move when you're evolving like you talked
Right,
about.
so if I
before.
understand correctly, what you're saying is if the ordinance approved by council to issue the bonds says we're gonna build a police station with this money, then we build a police station with that money, depending on how it's exactly worded and how you define
Well,
expansion.
again, the police addition, that can mean different things, so
Sure,
we're struggling too, and part of this is a legal issue. Legally, you can't be too vague. Same
Right.
with this building here, of how specific, naturally, we're trying to create flexibility for the council to have some room later, like you talked about. At the same time, obviously, we've got to do what's legal and what's right that way,
yeah,
so.
and I mean, elections, we can't keep
So-
shutting down the library year after year.
So
for
actually,
elections.
this is one of the exact one issue we're gonna talk with council about tomorrow night, about what that ordinance is gonna look like and what that language is, and to let them to be thinking about, how specific do we need to
Great.
be on some of these projects, and,
Well, thanks for your patience and. and
it's good
taking time
questions.
to answer my questions.
Sure.
And thanks for all the hard work y'all have put into this.
Thanks, Sue, appreciate that.
So, Tom, we've had a comment come in online that
Okay.
Michael has passed on to me.
Good.
Can we get more grants or aid money from the government so the citizens don't have to pay for most of it? And of course, since it's an online comment, it comes from Lady Justice 23.
Well, man, I didn't know she lived here. I just say, I think the council knows this certainly, and anybody that monitors what we do is, we're aggressively seeking all the grant funds we can get anywhere. Amy in particular, Charles and his staff do some great work of securing grants. The Pistol Hill water tank is a prime example of one that we just recently were awarded a $5 million grant. Well, it's a $5 million project essentially, but will be, it's a 1% match for the city. So we're just gonna have to spend about $49,000 to get $4.9 million in a project that's huge for us, that we lived frightened every moment during the snowstorm that something was going to happen to that thing, which really would have been bad for us. But so we have that project. We have the two projects that are shown here on the sidewalk grants that we have. We've done a great job of doing that. And the third sidewalk grant that's not even included in here, where we're getting $871,000 in grants for that. We're always trying to get all the grants we can. We've enhanced our staff in the past few months and have some really highly skilled people that have a lot of experience about filing for grants. Bo does an excellent job of keeping us up on what's available. As I said, we don't hit a home run every time we go for a grant, but we're always looking for those opportunities wherever we can, and we'll continue to do that with all of these projects. Even though they'll move forward, we'll be continuing to try to lessen that load. And like I said, I referred to earlier, I do think it's, on that regard, it's worth noting that this is, these numbers indicate we're trying to get all the outside sources we can. And we continue to try to relieve stress on the general fund and off our property taxes and our ratepayers. I think one thing that we didn't get to say tonight that I want to make clear is that as the mayor talked about, all these projects have been contemplated for a long time. They've been in our 5-year plan for a long time. In the 5 years that I've been city manager here in Elgin, every year we've talked about the need to do the sewer plant. That was known, that's been planned. Bo's had the plans ready, been pushing for that. It clearly had that need, but every year the council made a conscious public decision that they talked about is we want to wait as long as we can to hold off the impact on ratepayers as long as we can. We've just reached a point where we literally waited as long as we can. We knew that, so we could have done the plant 2 or 3 years ago, and rates would have been increased then. So we know it's a big bite to take, but at the same time, these things just cost money, and we're doing our best to keep, I think, anybody that follows what we do, we keep costs down and services up, and we're looking for grants, but at the same time, it comes down to there's not a magical solution to address the needs that we have are going to cost money. There's only one place for the city to get its money. It's property taxes or utility rates right now. But as I said before, we're very much focused on growing our business community and in turn growing sales tax revenue in Texas. That's the best revenue stream any city can generate to help offset the pressure on property taxes and utility rates, is get more commercial businesses here. And that's only going to happen after we get more houses built. That's by far, that's the biggest number, that's the biggest place for us to make money, I would say, Sue. So, yeah, thanks. What? Well, I didn't say there wasn't a cost associated with it, but in the end of the day, sales tax is where we get the extra money as far as the Texas city goes. But you're right, all of the growth elements impact every service we have. More people at the parks, more impacts on the police, more traffic on our roadways. So there's a cost associated with it. You're right. Welcome. See, I knew y'all could fill up the hour and a half.
Well, I've been thinking about what Sue said ever since you first came up, and the idea of community and building a community that feels very inclusive and warm, and how that might be impacted by the police station there, which is there and probably not going anywhere. But so I have a suggestion. And that is, I think in designing that building, if it does end up on the final, is to think about that comment and find a way to make that building an accessibly part of the community. I think I want to say that we have benefited from being next to the police on some number of occasions over the past many years when clients with mental health problems began to act up, and we were at our safety was somewhat compromised, and we had to ask the police to help us, and they've so far, on those, thank goodness, very rare occasions, have done it in a way that diffused the situation and calmed the situation. Nothing like you hear about on the news with, things that quickly escalate and go bad. So, but I do feel like the way that the police department is now, and it's because of the building and the way that it's stuck with that, very little public access. So when we go over there, well, right now it's like ring the doorbell outside, but even before, there's a little, very, very tiny little room for the public, and the police serve the public, and they have to sometimes act like the social workers when there are none. So I know that on many occasions over the past few years, our clients who are homeless and needing to get out of weather in the middle of the night were able to go into that police department foyer. Police were able to call us and say, can come get this person, put them in a motel, they're at risk. But it's pretty hard to really get in there. It's like I say, it's narrow. If you've got a big park in front and you're designing, you might want to think about make that very open and have some place really where the police can do community policing. The park gives a good opportunity for them to get out and mingle with folks. But if people could come in, I think it probably help.
Thank you. No, we agree with that. I think the accessibility, it's not exactly an inviting environment down there, and not due to the police. I'm glad you said that. It's the building. So we already recognize that as a weakness, and I think that if we hadn't made that clear already, we recognize it would be a unique location, and so the challenge for us is we think we can make it a welcoming place, more accessible. And you know, to me, the challenge will be, how can it be a police station but not look like the police station from the outside, so that it melds well with the downtown area and the concerns you said. So we agree with that point, so it's a good one. Okay, last chance, anybody? Yep, thanks for coming out, and everything's on the website, everybody's contact information. Jessica, do you want to say anything, or Thomas? Okay. I encourage you to, those of you who haven't already, make sure you introduce yourself to our council members, and any follow-up questions, let me know. We'll be glad to respond. Appreciate everybody coming out.